welcome to another All About Trauma live stream on YouTube with my friend and colleague Nicholas. Thank you, Nicholas, for joining. And on this live stream, we're going to cover in a couple of issues from the last ACE test. And just to mention for our viewers, this time we're not talking about biscuits or tea. We allow you to just remember that you can buy us a virtual coffee so that you can bring out more coffee, more biscuits, so we can talk about the dessert. So I'm very excited of what you're going to talk about today. So none of us have beverages today, but you can support us so that we can get some beverages in the
Yeah,
next live. So
yeah,
how are you
please
feeling,
do. Sure.
Nicholas?
Yeah, very good. We tried to do a live on Saturday. I was out in Sofia. Unfortunately, because of connection issues, we couldn't really run the live, and so we removed it. But we'll be talking a little bit about the things that I was mentioning in that live, and then moving on with some of the topics that we couldn't cover because of the connection issue that I know you will want to cover on.
Yeah.
So yeah, as soon as our YouTube viewers are online, I'll introduce my topic today, and then we'll move on from there. How is it going?
YouTube is actually just live right now. Welcome, YouTube. Just connected.
Yes,
So
welcome YouTube, welcome everybody. So I'll jump straight into it. Basically, I went to see a show, a live show in a theater from a group, a UK group with mixed genders and races actually in it, as UK is made actually of many different ethnic people. And the group is a percussive group, but they dance. There is a lot of comedy, like the particular kind of humor that you find in England. There is some acrobatics in a way, so it's kind of a mixed genre kind of show, and very high quality. I was really impressed. They surpassed my expectations by far. So I would really highly recommend everyone to go and see the show wherever they are. They're called the Stomp, Stomp, and you can see a trailer of their show on YouTube. But actually, the trailer will not give you a good idea of what the show really is. So that's nice. You know, when your expectations get fulfilled and surpassed, that's a good outcome. The reason why I brought up this subject, Rene, on Saturday is because whenever I see someone, a group of people that has focused so much of their energy in being creative and then come up with such a beautiful product of creativity, it really reminds me of what I had focused on from the very beginning of my practice. And in fact, it's kind of all over my website as well. The message that healing is a creative process. And the connection with the work of the Stomp goes one step further in this case, because the whole show is about taking up things that are common to our daily life and then create sounds and stories with those sounds by tapping on it in different ways with different objects and so on and so on. There is a little video that I filmed in Sofia just to show you the kind of objects that they would play with. So maybe we can play the video now. So yeah, the extraordinary thing about the Stomp is that they have really selected all sorts of very, very common objects. Like this fence is definitely something that I look now at, something like that the Stomps would have used, or that garbage bin down there, or the signpost there. That barrier there would have been something. The stones here would have been something that they might have wanted to tap onto or play with. And I think that's basic. The impressive thing about this group is that they have chosen to play with common objects of reality. And I see a strong similarity between the choices and the process that they might have gone through in doing this, and the processes that I go through as a therapist with my clients, whereby when a client comes into the room with me, we begin to include everything in their lives, everything that has meaning or not meaning becomes a relevant issue of our attention. And it's only through particular processes of mindfulness and dialogue and agreement and mutual empathy that we begin again to narrow down our field of focus, but never in a very categorical or absolute way. We always keep the process very open. So what do we include, what do we not include in a process of consideration, dialogue, expression, and healing? This is a big fundamental question, and one that if you have a chance to go and see the Stomps, would be partly answered by them. Yeah, so there are a few things there that I mentioned that I want to comment a little bit more on. One is the aspect of play. The Stomps took elements in their daily lives and they played with them. And as they played with them, they thought, okay, maybe this kind of play can be matched to this kind of play. And then through those choices of play, they created a whole show around it. So I think the spirit, because I'm imagining this group really starting almost from nothing. Like just look around your room right now and think of your room in terms of sounds. Okay, so look at the objects that are around your room and think of the sounds that they would make if you tapped on them. For example, this cushion here, right? Right? This thing here. If I tap with my hand, and in fact, there was an exercise because it was actually interactive at some point with the Stomp. He showed us the difference between and right. So even just changing position of the hands creates a different sound, and you can literally create stories out of changing the pitch of the sounds and going up and down on a journey of different pitches. So the first thing I think that the Stomp did was to look around themselves and translate the physical environment into a soundscape, right? To imagine everything that surrounds them in terms of sounds, which is their interest, right? When I do this with my clients, we look around their lives, what they do on a daily basis, the people that they meet, the workplaces they go to, the kind of transportation that they use, the objects that are in their houses or that are not in their houses, the things that they don't use as well. So we look at everything that is there, that is not there, and then we try to translate that into the language of feelings. So the Stomps ask, what sound does it make? I ask, how does it feel? It's not very different. We just ask a different question, but the act of observation, the act of trying to identify and see things in the world that are there or not there, that is a creative process. That is a playful process. And that is a process that requires also trust in the relationship that they have with me, the clients have with me, and also kind of a faith in the process itself. There is an element of, you're investing in something that you don't know much about. Even if you come with a lot of ideas about what therapy is, it's probably not going to be applicable to this particular therapy with me. And so there is an aspect of faith in there as well. An aspect that, by the way, we are going to explore with a new guest coming Saturday, the aspect of faith. So this will probably connect with what I'm saying now. So that's the element of play. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention is this aspect of really focusing on the interaction that you have with these objects in a daily life. Like you become naturally more mindful about things when you have brought them to your attention consciously. Like when we explore a world that we haven't really paid attention to, a lot of things will come towards our senses: the colors, the shapes, the place in which these objects are or the people are, um, the way they contribute to the environment or the way that they don't contribute to the environment. And when we do this process consciously, something we become like something makes us feel much more alive. Suddenly we our spirit is elevated into a state of, oh, I'm alive. Why do we feel we're more alive? Because we are finally paying attention to things. So part of the feeling, for example, of not feeling alive, which is often associated with depression, at a large level, it's due to the fact that when we are depressed, we don't pay attention to anything anymore. We have lost the interest in paying attention to things. Right? So this process of play, this process of paying attention to the ordinary things of life are both very connected to the healing therapeutic process, and I think also connected to the creative process in general. So that was my sort of input today.
I think maybe I could just comment and pick up on what you just said, that the liveliness that you feel, because even from the video, as you're doing your trip in Sofia, you've been to Sofia many times, and you will never think of this tone could be a music, that trash bin could be music, the metal could be music, and that's something that you've gone through many times. Still, the
Yes.
people even in the video were passing through it, saying it's a trash bin, it's a
Yeah.
stone. So
Yeah.
what's nothing new to it? And it really
Precisely.
shows that the harmony that you have and the harmony that you see in your world now is so totally refreshed. Even in that room right now, probably I've never tapped
No.
that flower pot ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why would you?
Exactly.
Why would you tap your sofa? So
Yeah.
it's really such it really is, it is a renewed experience for you.
Yeah. This could be almost like a drum, right? She's okay. Don't worry. Not that big. But yeah, exactly. So indeed, and that's the preciousness of going to such shows, you know, and exposing ourselves to people that dedicate their lives to being creative and do creative things. Yeah, yeah, very well
so
said. So I
so
know that you yourself have been creative lately, Rene,
yeah,
because we are planning to do something a little bit special on this channel.
yeah.
We I suggested that after we have gone through all these questions of the ACE, right? Like in such depth, we talked about the problems, but we didn't really talk about the healing that could be attached to these issues, right? That we looked at in the ACE. And then we went from there and something escalated, and you can tell us all about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we got to understand and want to delve in is the healing process and how this healing process will be contextualized for different individuals, whether it comes from, like they said, our own environments. People come from different environments, and what they have and what they have to play with is different. So we decided to create what could be different personas that you could meet. Can we use the technology that we are so dependent on and we are fed into and we still keep developing to help us develop these maybe caricatures and characters, to help us understand how will they understand these situations that we go through as humans, and how will they be able to possibly identify what is the next course of action depending on the different setting and the context that we tailor them to. So it started off from the very basic of gender, man and woman. We are both men.
And before
And
you go on, I do want to premise, because it seems like a little step might be missing in the story. But as you were speaking, I was reminded of this. when we thought about going through the ACE test again, but from a healing perspective, we realized pretty quickly that we would do a lot of work of empathy, that we would do a lot of work of trying to imagine ourselves into the shoes of somebody, and then again relate empathically, and then from that place of empathy to then try to find actions that might help us in that situation. We have been using empathy and empathic work throughout this process, right? Throughout this work. But here we want to go a step further in taking that empathy a bit more seriously to then step into action after that. And so as we were wondering about empathy, we also wondered how would someone from the US, for example, typically feel empathy for somebody going through this situation? How would somebody from your country, which as we have seen is a collectivist culture, right?
Yeah.
Demonstrate empathy for their person. And so that triggered our interest in connecting with these new personas, right?
Absolutely. And empathy really has been a thing that you've brought in, whether it's with our guests, whether it's with the stories that you have brought in. Because these individuals that we're bringing as far as stories, your stories, my stories, guest stories, they are third parties, and we're able to understand their story and not really maybe get to engage them, because this is a something that has already happened and they are not with us right now. So this is what actually happened when we come to empathy, to create profiles of individuals to understand when it comes to the US, what is the average profile of the UH? What kind of average person can we get to see, modify or create as a profile to say this is the average experience of the person that we might see on a day-to-day basis, with their capacity, not the capacity that we have, that we have dealt with going through the different questions, but the capacity of a novice, maybe like me, or maybe less, or maybe none. So understanding these profiles, we started off with ladies, when understanding as far as the average ladies, what does
And
that even mean?
how did we do
What
this?
does that mean, that we can understand what they're going
We
through and how do they
technology.
see their own story? So um go
Sorry,
ahead.
Rene, we haven't mentioned the technology that we're using, so
Yeah.
uh, people might be a little lost. We
Yeah.
actually went on to ChatGPT and asked ChatGPT um, to give us its idea of an average American female person, right? How they would look like, what they would be doing during the day, and so on and so on, right? So the technology we are using is ChatGPT.
Yeah, actually, even I was getting to that. So to understand, when I mentioned about the technology and understanding that this technology that we usually depend on, that even as we are connected with empathy, does this technology have its own bias as we do? So we started off of, we didn't even ask what is an average American. When we started the foundational questions, what is an average woman? And I think, Nicholas, you and I got to realize that it was inclined towards an American woman. So when we talked about and the average woman generally in this day and age, we got to understand that as it inclined towards an American woman. So the question we got to see is that they named this individual Emma. She was middle-aged. I think the term that we used as average, from average or middle age, I think it coincides with what Americans and what we colloquially say middle age. Middle age is assuming that our mortality rate is around 70. So the person was put in their mid 30s, fair enough, right? So the individual was American. She was white. She was Caucasian, more like you. And she got to be created as an individual who has number one, middle management career. So the first three things that I found very curious, and I was getting to feed off from ChatGPT, those are three areas that it got to define very clearly from the onset: the age, right? and the middle management career. Of course, the fact that the race is majority Caucasian, right? So the person is the lady called Emma is put in a middle management career in the industry of marketing, which I think is a popular industry right now. So when this profile was created, Nicholas, the first question, when I got to share it with you, the first question we got to ask ourselves is, why is there this inclination, and can we delve deeper towards this inclination, towards this bias? And you allowed me to say, okay, this individual is more Western. Can we go more Eastern? And to go more Eastern, the most foundational thing we started off is language. ChatGPT has many languages, and maybe not just the terms we used, but can we change the language so that it will be translated differently? Language can create its own world in itself. So I decided to involve ChatGPT in the land of Swahili. And that was fun. I got to now speak to it in my national language, asking the same question. Ideally, I did the same translation, and the result was totally different, more inclined to my worldview, just because I was able to give that result and give that, I would say, prompt that now we call a prompt, but it's actually just an instruction
Although
to
that,
create an average woman.
if I can interrupt you there for a moment, I think that's where we realize that the Caucasian, white, individualistic, oriented, career oriented bias was sort of transferred to even the Swahili world. I think even when you asked the question about, well, not the question, you were asking ChatGPT to give you an average profile of an average woman in Kenya, it profiled this person as kind of quite similar to the other character, Emma. Sort of sort of making it look like this person was your typical average Kenyan person, and right, like, am I correct?
Yes, yes, because I think the question I got to of the question we had and the prompt we had in English. So I just asked in Swahili, what is the average, what are the features and characteristics of the average woman? So the question was exactly the same, ideally. And it did generate something inclined to its previous result. So we found out quite interesting that in its essence, the answer will generally be the same, even though the wording could be different. So we got to now get deeper and ask, by the way, the question, the reason why I'm asking Swahili and getting you to engage with you, ChatGPT, in this language is because I want something closer to someone who will communicate this way and who lives in this reality. So we got to, and I got to understand and define the question, an average woman in Kenya. And it now regenerated a different result, but still it was not satisfactory to fit into this collectivist reality that this language lives in. So now I had to now give a bit of fine tuning. There's an image and there's a video that we got to understand about the new terminologies where we need to know when dealing with these technologies. I think some of the viewers know about the fine tuning and the prompt engineering. Basically what we're doing, we got to fine tune and say, wait, ChatGPT, this is a Swahili woman. She's called Amina, right? Very common Swahili name, different from Emma. So she's not a Swahili version of Emma. She's Amina. So
Although,
why aren't you generating? Yeah.
can I stop you there for a moment? Although initially, if I remember well, Amina was also inclined towards career, and because she was like in her
Yeah.
late 20s or early 30s and still unmarried,
Early
and
30s.
that's when
Yes.
your expertise of the culture came in and thought, oh, this is really strange. I
Yeah.
can't remember exactly the details of how that was phrased, but there was something strange about this profile, and also the idea that this was being described as being the average person. So the average person in Kenya, the average woman in Kenya, sorry, is not married by 30 and is completely fine with it. That was really strange to you. So we looked up some statistics online, some serious sort of sources. In fact, we found one from the UN, and it told us that the average marriage age is 19 for women and 20 for men. And so that's when we started to
19 to 21 for women. Yeah.
21. That's when we started to realize that the Caucasian bias that we had seen for the United States was being transferred, although this was a different check actually, so there was no connection between the
Yeah.
checks. But just overall, it seemed like this individualistic, career-oriented, liberal or neoliberal values sort of based view of a person was being injected in this Kenyan profile as well.
Yeah, and that was an issue that I had, that we had to bring in the statistics, because I I really expected, when I created this fresh pond with Amina, I really expected that immediately, because I'm engaging with it in a very native tongue, I will be easily able to empathize with the results. But I was not, Nicholas. Amina was someone that is not the average person that you will see around. She is more progressive, which is nothing wrong with progressive, but it is not the average result. I wasn't able to empathize the way I was supposed to empathize. So that's where we were able to get into statistics and draw statistics from the UN, draw statistics from even government website and government research that has been happening in Kenya. And I got to feed it in this, wait a minute, this profile you're creating, these are disconnect with what has been studied on the ground from this community, from my community. I can own it, from my community. So I got to feed it this data information, and interestingly, Nicholas, it got to justify this result, saying that the reason why Amina was more neoliberal inclined, because it is an emerging trend. She could be part of the new trend that is more career oriented, that is delaying giving birth to children, that is delaying getting a spouse. And that result wasn't satisfactory for me. I wasn't satisfied with that, because that doesn't mean that's the average, just because she could possibly. In fact, I noticed the major issue is that they put Amina in a urban setup. There are urban setups, but that's not the average. Most of the country is not an urban setup. As that now we have 5 cities. Our whole country is much bigger than 5 cities. The people who live in these 5 cities are less than maybe 30% of the population who live in these cities. And
Because
even
usually
though,
the concentration of people in cities is usually higher than that in the
yeah,
countries, especially in Western countries. But I have no idea what the situation is in Kenya. Do you
yeah,
do you have any sort of real data to back yourself up there? Because I
yes,
usually trend is for people to move from the country to the city, and so cities. I think I remember a statistic some years ago that would say by 2100 or something, 80% of the world would be living in a city.
um, I have some statistics to back that up. In fact, the city that I live in, which is the capital city, Nairobi, we have a population of 5 million, right? The whole
Right.
population is close to 55 million. Out of the
Mm.
5 cities that we have, most of them, none of them get to be as populated as Nairobi. So much less. I would see an average maybe of 2 million, 1.5 million for the other 5 cities. So we're talking
Uh-huh.
about at most 10 million people living in cities. If we go too far, maybe 13 million out of 55 million people.
So that's
So
a mhm,
that's still a very a low percent. So
mhm.
placing Amina in this more progressive, she will definitely be living in the city, and she will definitely be looking to get her job, and definitely looking to further her education, and definitely looking to put a pause on her relationship and her childbirth at 30. That did not make sense. So I had to revise that situation. Like you said, most married at 1921, by 25, they has at least a kid, one child. 28, 30 could have been 2 or 3 children. And that is, in fact, maybe I can maybe just hop on a bit, fast forward a bit quicker, the whereby when I got to feed these statistics, the new profile was Amina had 3 children by 32, which makes sense. She was married at 21, she had 3 children by 32. She, as far as career, the initial result is that she had a college degree. In this new revised profile, the honest is that even though we have a very high university intake and graduation, I would say as in percentage of graduation, it's increasing. That's good, but still, it's not optimum compared to other places. So the fact that she had a college degree on average it was also a bit skewed. So the new result is that she had a high school degree, which makes sense especially for the last, I would say, 15 years. Uh, the education system from primary all the way to end of secondary has been relatively cheap, sometimes even fully government sponsored. For those who might not be able, which is the vast majority, who might not be able to take their children to private school, the public education services and schools are there to be able to facilitate that education process up until there. So that was one thing that it was able to, and it had to rectify. Um, Also getting to understand the breakdown of the tasks. Maybe you can get into it. The breakdown of the tasks, we got to ask, okay, this is the average woman you'll be able to generate. What is our average and typical tasks in a week? 7 days. What is she likely to do? What is she likely to be in, and the tasks she's able to do
Yeah,
and the activities?
yeah. We asked what are the things that she's paying attention to? What are the things that she's engaging with? And we did the same for Emma in the United States, and
Yes,
we got some interesting results to compare, right?
absolutely. One thing we've got to see in the Western set is that number one, um, the highest chunk of their time, maybe 40-45%, was put in careers. Then the second tier, I would say, of allocation when it comes to time allocation was personal time. But this personal time, the other tiers could have, and we got to argue that it could have still been part of the personal time, because the personal time was connecting with friends, the personal time was hobbies. Then hobbies was different from personal time, even though we got to understand that in this context that we have created, when Emma is going from an 8 to 5 and finishing her work,
Might be
she's
useful
going.
to show these statistics because it's a little hard to follow the numbers just in the spoken word. If you can bring up the screen, the
Oh, okay, let me actually I'll open my browser for that, but maybe it can be possible.
so I think what you were trying to say is that we were seeing that in Emma there were a lot of different activities that were mentioned in terms of the percentage of attention being paid to that activity, but really these activities did not differ much from one another. There were still activities that mostly pay attention to herself. So for example, having a hobby was differentiated from taking time for herself. Taking time for herself was
Yeah,
differentiated from spending time with her friends. Spending time with her friends was differentiated from going to the cinema
exercising
or
and yoga.
yeah, exercising, okay, or going to the cinema and spending time with entertainment. And really, when we look at it, this differentiation doesn't make much sense from the point of view of a collectivist, culture. They're all activities where the me is the central subject of interest. So that's also quite interesting, right? In the West, we make such a big deal out of spending time with friends or spending time watching a movie on our own or exercising on our own or meditating on our own or being alone for that matter. But really, from a collectivist point of view, all of these are just me time. So that's a major sort of point I think to
Yeah,
highlight.
yeah. I think we can actually bring up the
The
numbers later,
website.
but
Uh,
that's exactly what we got to realize, that from Emma, that was the main would say breakdown. When even when it comes to, we haven't mentioned her relationship life. Emma also had no children, but she had a partner. They say a long-term partner for 2 years. So that was also one of the least allocated time. And one thing we've also got to mention from our first inquisition on this particular agenda of their task, Emma had no sleep time. She wasn't allocated any sleep time. There was no allocation of Emma's sleeps during this time. So we got to pick up on that later, that after all these uh, tasks, does she sleep, or is it a thing that is necessary to bring up? Maybe initially ChatGPT didn't find it necessary to even bring that up. When I asked Amina on the different prompt of Amina, the first result is that she was given some allocation for rest time. For Amina, the main tasks were uh, household agriculture, because the main and the average occupation in the country is still, we're very agricultural and connected to the sun. I think we have even mentioned it. I got to mention it, that in Kenya we really feel connected to the sun and the soil and the environment. Reason I have this painting here also. So it's a deep rooted activity that we take pride in. So Emma will definitely have most of her time in the farm as of doing her agricultural stuff. Secondly, she will be taking care of her household, her children, and her husband. That's the second thing. The third thing they got to mention is that religious and social activities, spiritual activities. This is the communal, no, after communing with the earth, the communing with her nuclear family that she's very ingrained part of, a very pillar of, rather. She was connecting with her communal community, which she was set up in a rural setup whereby she would be close, which is very common. We would be close with your in-laws. That's your family. So you're
mm,
spending time connecting with your family, whether it's through religious issues, whether it's through traditional activities, whether it's
ceremony.
just even through, maybe, yeah, whether it's just even through marketplace days. Many times when it comes to marketplace days, you go, you'll maybe have a farm that does maize or corn or beans or any of these grains. You want to go and connect with your family member who is in a poultry farmer, a dairy farmer. You get to have that exchange. That time is also allocated for. So it really showed that the difference. And in Amina, it really made sense to understand that most of her allocation was through the collective and the collective task.
Mm. And where did the me time come into that picture? Was there any me time?
There was no allocated any mean time. There was only an unallocated time. So that unallocated time possibly could be mean time, but like we have mentioned, and I got to share with you the principle of Ubuntu: you are, therefore I am. If I disconnect from you, what me time then doesn't exist, because if I find myself in you, and I find myself and I get to that lively feeling, as we mentioned, when we see the environment and connect with you as a soul and empathize with you, I feel more of myself. Disconnecting
Mm.
from that, what is the me time? The me time, that's not how we define me time. So it's still a concept that wasn't brought up in the same way Amina actually wasn't brought up at all. And that is actually correct for Amina, as it was in Emma, whereby it wouldn't be making sense, whereby Amina, after going from the farm, she's going to meditate or go to do yoga. Why?
On a
It
lawn,
wouldn't make
on
sense.
a patch of land somewhere, disconnected
Yes,
from.
it wouldn't make sense. It doesn't sound very realistic, because
Mm.
even as you are doing that, you are disconnected from the people who you are supposed to connect to. You live next to these people, you do tasks next to these people. Telling your children, oh, stay stay away, I'm trying to meditate, is something you will never hear in this context. So it was really fundamental to bring that out.
So would people, would the family think what's wrong with you if you said that? I'm going to
Yes,
meditate, don't come into my room or something like that.
yeah, it will mean that it's a rejection. It's a powerful rejection, because it means that I don't want to connect with you. Let me be. The immediate thing is that, have I done something wrong? Is it something wrong with the system of our connection, that you don't want to participate in this fellowship? Because the only reason, the only time where it will be very wrong, there has to someone else to intervene. In fact, the person told that will bring someone else involved. That, okay, that means Nicholas doesn't want to talk to me. Let me call our friend and ask Nicholas what's wrong, and help us connect. So you will have even less personal time. Now we will bring everyone involved. Like, why do you want to be alone? Because it
uh,
doesn't make sense.
yeah,
It
and again, I definitely don't want to put darkness or negative value judgments on the individualistic cultures that I belong to. That's not the purpose here. But this me is a lesser, this me alone, this me disconnected is a lesser part or a lesser being than the me connected to others. And that's, to me, that's so easy to understand, because even in individualistic countries, one of the things that people suffer from the most, and I've mentioned it many times on this channel, is loneliness and isolation. And we know today that the part of the brain that processes isolation is the same part of the brain that processes physical pain. So
mm,
when we are part of a group, feeling, for example, feeling shame out of having done something, when we feel shame, as far as we understand, the emotion of shame is kind of a red flag alert that we may have done something that might lead to the group to push us outside of the group.
mm,
So it's like a warning system. Say, hey, you are playing with things that the group really doesn't like, and see them as belonging to the outside world rather than the inside world, and then that's dangerous. So the innate fear of being ostracized and being excluded from groups is present in all of us, including in all of the human beings that are part of individualistic countries and cultures, where the emphasis is so high on personal um, development and personal goals and personal separation from the group. In other words, the culture at a broad level is encouraging everybody to detach from the group and to face this fear of letting down the group with bravery and courage. Okay, that's the message we get from individualistic cultures. But the psychology of it tells us that while we may do that, that comes at a cost. It doesn't come for free. When we struggle and fight against our desire to belong and our fear of being left alone, we accumulate a lot of stress. We produce cortisol in our bodies. And through that cortisol, we produce all these hyperstate and hypostates that we have often talked about. Right? All the consequences that has on our mental health and our physical health as well. So the typical standard message of an individualistic culture goes against, if you like, personal regulation, mental and physical health, at least in the long term. It has its value for sure, right? We wouldn't have discovered all the things that we have discovered with a mindset of just staying with the group, probably. But in the long term, if you apply that principle without criticism, then it's gonna lead to a place of unhealthiness, illness, literally.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a parenthesis on the issue of why Amina, is not taking time off just to be alone, and how your culture would say, oh, something must be wrong here, right? So let me call my friend to investigate what's going on, because obviously she doesn't want to talk to me. It's not because she wants to be alone, it's because there is something wrong about me and our relationship. You see how the lens is still relational, right? We, in a collectivist culture, we don't quite understand this I want to be just alone kind of place. I want to be disconnected. Why would you want to do that? And because I've lived in collectivist cultures, and I've been part of collectivist cultures, and I felt like those of that were there, I can totally relate to that. I can totally relate to that strangeness. And of course, being also a member of individualist cultures, I can relate to that being normal.
And what you're explaining is so true, and maybe even to demonstrate it, I really enjoyed this story whereby this moment you had with Stomp, and all of you are clapping in a certain way. The feeling of harmony is what we feel when we're still connected. You can imagine when you're supposed to clap this way, and then one individual says, "Forget you." I feel like,
Uh-huh.
wait, the harmony is everyone will start looking. Wait, why would you want to do that? Why would you
Well,
want
actually,
to? We are.
absolutely part of the comedy of Stomp in this interactive exercise that we had was about us not being harmonious with the clapping. And it went on for like 20, 30 minutes. Like the guy really took time. And actually, thinking back about it, that's really quite amazing. It's all because that was such like a live part that obviously every show is going to be different. And so the length of the show is going to be different as well. But the guy really took time to allow the audience to come to a place of harmony in their clapping. And it was amazing, like the improvements that we saw by the end of the show. We were able to do things that we were like we couldn't even imagine we could do on our own by the end of it, so totally with you there what you're saying.
Yes, and I think it really helps to have those moments whereby you just organically got to come together. How long it takes, it doesn't matter how whether it's 20, 30 minutes, but getting to feel and get to understand, I feel in this moment this should be the pitch, and hearing the pitch and flowing with it until you get to that point, you makes you feel that you weren't led to that point, even though Stomp was kind of orchestrating it. It was still a natural experience and a collective experience within you individual selves. So this actually is how it happens with our cultures, whereby yeah.
Sorry, I'll stop you because I want to reflect on what you're saying. I want to absorb what
Yeah.
you're saying. So please keep in mind where you want to go. I want to keep following you, but I also want to see how does this apply in this moment to me. You're right about the fact that the Stomp guy was orchestrating all of this, but for me to tune in with everybody else, I had to listen to everybody else, right? I had to really feel, anticipate what everybody else might do. And if I focus in this moment where we will come together, because that's perhaps what you're pointing to also, is that, Nicolas, that moment when you're all coming together, is that maybe what you guys feel much more commonly and frequently? What would you
Yes,
say so?
yes, it actually is what you usually feel more frequently, whether it's a task, whether it's ceremonies, whether it's raising children and connecting. That's how we feel when we come together. Even though we'll say our Stomp is our beliefs that sometimes are written, sometimes are unwritten, mostly unwritten, that quote unquote are our Stomp, our orchestrators, that this is where we want to go, but still listening and still hearing the pitch of this is the mood of the community, this is how I will be. this is the mood of maybe a burial, this is the mood for a wedding, this is how I'll be, this is the pitch I'll get to mold into and create this harmony in the moment with others and enjoy this harmony. So this is what we usually do and it's a very everyday thing. So the harmony, I would say the harmony of the collective is something that every person gets to look forward to. You can imagine if you get to look forward to this every day, which harmony can you get into? How will we get into that harmony where we have this perfect symphony and you almost lose yourself? Pitch, you can't hear your own clapping. You can just hear the
Yeah.
rest and you know you're part of the rest.
True, 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 true. Beautiful. Yeah, I like that so much. Even though you cannot hear yourself, you know you exist and you feel alive because you feel a part of this bigger thing than yourself. And in
Yeah.
a way, that reminds me of some of the things we're telling about nature, right? Where nature is seen as a subject in your culture and it's seen as an object in our Western cultures, right? You are part of nature, and by that, you're not a lesser being, you're a higher being because you're part of something that is bigger than you. So even though the accent is not in recognizing the particular shape of you, but just being part of this greater force makes you feel alive. This is really such insightful conversation, I would say, and such at the crux of the difference between Western cultures and, let's say, Eastern, or in this case, Southern African cultures. This sense that we can feel alive and feel that we are, that I am, that I recognize myself, even though I'm doing that through the belonging to this greater whole. I don't need to go alone and isolate myself. Oh, here I am. Here's Nicolas. Oh, this arm here, these fingers are finishing here. This head is this shape, and these my feelings. Probably there isn't much of a need to do that.
Absolutely. And even as you do this and you get to see the world differently, like I really got to enjoy and maybe you can connect, I can connect the time whereby you said that how the Westerners see the environment as something that has to be tamed.
Mm-hmm.
And it is so fruitful to have that video of you whereby you might be the only one who went to the Sophia and go to the square and got to see that trash bin, this stone, this metal isn't thing that has to be tamed and fixed in this puzzle and the jigsaw and domesticate, that it has to stay there and things has to stay there and things has to stay there. I can get to understand the music in it instead of seeing it as just an this stone is here so that don't get dirty, or this barricade is here so that there's a separation. So it needs to be fixated there, and it's an object, and that trash bin has to be there because it needs to, isolate the trash. We can see the music in the harmony in different things, and it really can help. And possibly even as we get to see and get to share with this with our viewers, they will be able to see that in their lives. Maybe not even outside, even in our rooms, as you've talked, in our rooms, seeing we have a flower pot, I have a sofa. How can I not see it as something that, oh, the sofa is misaligned? Let me fixate it. It needs to be controlled. That flower pot needs to be controlled. It needs to look in a certain way. We can see it as just more than that, and as part of an environment and things that we can play with, that we can be creative with, not just control.
And things we can belong to and be part
Yeah.
of.
Yeah. So so
Yeah.
this is the process that we're in. Even with our technology, it's a very good conversation. We're able to, yeah.
So I'm thinking basically what we are wanting to do in the following weeks, besides bringing some guests on the show, is to really invest a bit more time in understanding how ChatGPT, basically AI-driven chatbots, uh, might be able to help us finding empathy for certain situations, right? So we want to bring up certain situations, tell a story, and then you will comment, Rene, from your personal subjective perspective. I will comment from my personal subjective and professional perspective. And then we will ask these different personas rooted in different cultures on ChatGPT what they see, what what they can empathize with, and how they might respond. And in so doing, we're going to be able to start to explore this technology in a critical way, identifying some of the pluses and the minuses, the positives and the negatives, and therefore, hopefully, offering the public some form of protection, let's say, in engaging with these tools in a beneficial way, right? Not taking some of the risks that these new tools imply, because AI is like fire. It's a new, very powerful tool. You want to know how to play with fire. And so we are here. Hopefully we will be playing with fire and contain this fire for you then to be able to play with it as I say, in a much more beneficial way.
Absolutely. And I think, like you said, as AI is like fire, we don't want it to burn connections. We want it to warm. We want it to be like a campfire where you can all commune with and get to understand the warmth and the dangers of it and get to control it, whether we have to put it in a certain place, but it will be very fruitful for the viewers and for us as a community and you and I to understand how far can this go and how far can our empathy go. So I'm really looking forward to it. And I really suggest everyone to make sure that you get to join us in this new refreshed journey of seeing this healing process of trauma.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll see you on Saturday with the guest that we have from your community, Rene, a psychologist that works in Kenya with different clienteles, and she will be telling us about her story of trauma, her story of healing, and then generally speaking, what she sees counseling is in the community that you belong to. So I look forward to everybody seeing you there, and thank you, Rene, for being here today and accompanying me on this journey today, and I'll see you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you, Nicholas.